Hello, good afternoon. My name is Canary Mugume. I am an investigative journalist with NBS Television, a local TV here in Uganda. Glad to be here. In 2000 and, this is just last year in May, around the 10th of May, someone granted me an interview that I'd been looking forward to for 3 years. And this was the president. So I went through, a couple of revisions and all, and later went to State House to do this interview. I was lucky that I dictated exactly where I wanted the interview to be, which was in the gazebo outside, and it was all set. Along with me was just my producer and my camera guy. 30 minutes to the arrival of the president, I was asked, someone from protocol came and whispered something to my ear and said, "Would you please step aside for a few minutes? Would like to talk to you about something." I was like, oh, okay. Maybe it's, protocol briefing, the president is about to arrive and etc. When I stepped aside, I was asked to remove the microphone. I was like, oh, okay, maybe this briefing is so, security-wise, it's so maybe they don't want whoever is on the camera to hear what they want to say. Then when I removed the microphone, I was asked to go back and sit in the lounge because I was not going to do the interview. I asked why. They said, your producer is going to do the interview instead. I said, but I've been rehearsing for this interview for years. I've asked for it for years. It's been granted me today. I've been practicing and doing revision and notes and all for days. So this is it. I said, no, you can't. I'm speaking to security inside State House, so you cannot argue with them. I took the back seat. Minutes later, when the president arrived, I think wondered why I was not in the seat where I was supposed to be. And, everything was cleared. I was returned to do the interview anyway. So I did the interview. But after the interview, I asked why I had been asked to step aside. I had been told that protocol had checked my previous stories about government and they had not liked them. So I said, I work for a private independent media house that does not necessarily do PR for government, so they do not have to like the stories. But that was the reason. And I almost missed the interview by a whisker. This is just in 2020, last year in May. But let me take you back in 2017. Same thing happened. Someone did not like my work. In 2017, security was cracking down on a notorious criminal group that had terrorized a lot of young people, and especially those that ride borders, motorcycles. I happened to have broken the story that military was actually going to crack a whip on them. Then I used to anchor news very early in the morning at 6. So if you know NBS Sunrise, so that's the bulletin I used to anchor. It was at 6 in the morning, but I left work at 5. I left home at 5 in the morning to be at work a few minutes before 6 to prepare. Anyway, the story was broken over the weekend on a Saturday evening at about 8 p.m. I had the live event covering what had happened and whatever. It was such a big story that very day because no one had created a move or mechanism on how to crack a whip on these guys. They were really powerful. But with my cameras live on television, I had broken the story and I had all their faces on TV. It was a big story, but it was a dangerous one. The following week, on a Monday, as I went to anchor news on TV in the morning at 6, 2 border guys followed me right from home to office. When I reached work, I was driving. They entered the gate of the premises, and they had guns. So They asked me to open the door because they wanted to talk to me, but I could see they were armed. There were two driving border borders, but all of them had numberless number plates. I was so scared for my life because I had just joined journalism about a year and a half. This is 2017. And I was also still a student here at IUEA, still pursuing my degree. I had not yet finished. I saw my life ending in that exact minute. It had never occurred to me. I had always seen it in stories, in newspapers, or even movies, something like that happening. Anyway, luckily for me, I think a security guard at the premises of my office woke up, and he was armed and scared away the guy, so they drove off. And that is when I understood that these guys were not happy with the events I had reported about the previous week in the weekend. So it's true that in 2020, government had not liked my work. It is also true that in 2017, those guys who do not have anything to do with government had not liked my work. So after that event of the interview with the president, then I realized that I had chosen one of the most, or maybe not, but it was a very, very dangerous job I had chosen to do, journalism. I'll get back to this later. In 2018, I got a tip of a story, and I went to eastern Uganda in a district called Soroti. In Soroti, I discovered that they were selling young girls, age of 13, 12, and 15, around there. They were being sold at 50,000 shillings in a market called Arapai in Soroti district. Now, in this market, there were not just human beings on sale, but there were also animals like goats and cows, clothes, foodstuffs, and many other things. In the same market, you'd have to part with 250,000 to buy a goat, which means that the price of a young girl aged 13 years old was the price of a goat was 5 times more than the price of a human being. A goat, 250,000. A human being, 50,000. I did the story, the investigation, and published it later. But the story is that when you buy these young children, you bring them to the streets of Kampala and ask them to beg, because that's how the whole ring works. Put them on the streets, ask them to work, to beg. When they beg at the end of the day, no matter how much money they have made, so these guys who lead the cartels take off their commission. Actually, they take the money and then give these girls a commission after they have begged. And then after the end of the day, in the evening, take them to some, it's a house in Kampala here. There's so many girls who sleep on the floor, and they give them dinner, food, or whatever, I think posho and beans. In the morning, you have to go back to work. When you grow of age and you feel like you're tired of the business, what happens is that you can quit, but when you quit, there's not so many options for you. You don't have a family in Kampala. You don't have a life there, apart from the life on the street. Currently, there are about 150,000 children on the streets. And this is how they come to be on the streets. So I published this story, and it went out there. It was discussed in Parliament, and then even in the City Hall. City Hall is the house of debate for Kampala as a capital city, where councillors from each division go sit, talk about policy and issues affecting people in the city. So it's like the Parliament of Kampala. So it was discussed in the City Hall, and right there and then, after the debate, they agreed to pass a law that would criminalize not just being on the street as a beggar, but also giving cash handouts as cash to young girls and boys on the street. You'd either face 6 months in prison or pay a fine if you're caught. After this law was passed, I realized that I had not only chosen one of the most dangerous jobs in the world, related to my fear that I began with earlier, but I'd also chosen a job that would influence the kind of country I want to live in. So then I discovered that actually there's much more to just fear that I can see in this job, that I can influence government's actions using my job. As you well know, I'm a Ugandan and I don't have any other country to call home. And therefore, this country called Uganda, I thought to myself, I have to create an environment, a better environment, not just for myself, but also to every other Ugandan, because like myself, many other Ugandans call this country home. So I said, I am not going to abandon this job because of the fear, but instead use it to influence how government reacts. By doing this story, government had taken a step. We can question its effectiveness, but government had taken a step to make sure that it deals with the problem. Because human trafficking, modern day slavery, a human being sold at 50,000 shillings was just unacceptable. Not just the law, but also they deployed security around the entire corridor of Northeast, right from Karamoja to Soroti to Kampala. And now these days, if you're actually carrying young children who are below the age of 18 and you are a bus driver or a conductor, you are arrested at checkpoints until you can account or take responsibility of these young people, because that's how they are trafficked anyway. Carried from Karamoja, taken to Soroti into a market, and then sold off like tomatoes or onions or potatoes. So that action for me from government was very satisfying, and I don't think that I would really concentrate on the fear I had gotten about this job other than concentrating on how the influence that this job had come with. During COVID, a lot of Ugandans were stuck abroad. There were a lot of issues that were actually emerging around COVID. But I had a platform. This platform was news. This was something new in Uganda, COVID-19, and I had interacted with a lot of people, and we were trying to make sure that we find ways on how to deal with some of these issues that were emerging because of COVID-19. Some of them, among the challenges that came with it, was young Ugandans who had gone abroad to study, but were stuck because they couldn't travel back into the country. Neither could they move around to go and, because when you're abroad and you're studying, you're given some money for welfare. But this money had been paused in some of these countries, and also this money in some other countries was really stopped completely because governments really said, let's concentrate on the bigger problem, which is the economy, and make sure that people recover from COVID-19. So young Ugandans were actually stuck abroad because they could not even return home to be with their families for welfare issues. But I had a platform and I talked to a number of them. So what happened is that because of continuous interviews with young people abroad and telling their story and bringing to the center their plight, so government reacted and sent them money. They discussed it in Parliament. I think it was part of the money that was appropriated. The Ministry of Finance passed the budget. The Ministry of Education was also part. Anyway, the money was sent to them. I have never felt so grateful for a platform like that. For my thought, then this, I think, is an opportunity to change how government policy works. I don't need to be a leader. Talking about being a leader, during nominations and all, a certain political party came to me and said, you already have a name out there. I think if you stood as a youth member of parliament in Western Uganda, where I come from, it would be a great deal for you. I said, but I do not seek to be a member of parliament at any one point. I said, well, think about it. we'll sponsor all your campaigns, we'll pay for everything, but just know, I think it will be a good opportunity for you. But you see, having looked through the stories I had done and how much impact I had actually created using these stories, I discovered I don't need to be in Parliament to fight to change policy. Fine, that's where policy formulation does work best. But I thought by having a microphone, by having a platform like this, I'm much more in a better position to influence government policy as opposed to being in Parliament. So I took the right decision and stayed in my profession. Later on, when the elections were done, someone came to me and told me, actually, whoever came to you to talk to you about this, the party was trying to fight someone else. So I had made the right decision. So I discovered that with such a platform, doing news, just every day I wake up, Nada here was talking about passion. Every day I just wake up to think what is wrong in this country and how can we fix it. And for me, my job is just to report news, to investigate the rot in society and bring it to light. When it's exposed, maybe there's going to be action taken. As I conclude this, as like many other professions, I said earlier, they come with so many risks. But I think it takes someone who is passionate, someone who is determined, and someone who is actually in love with their country, in love with their land, in love with their people, to actually overlook the risks, not just underlook them, but focus on the bigger picture. And for me, the bigger picture here is change. Thank you.